don't have a couple of rules. Well, the first rule, you're not drinking, so we don't have to worry about that. Second rule is it's not a family show, so if you use colorful words, that's what you do. What was the other rule?
If you got a burp, lean in.
But you're drinking water. You still may need to burp.
Yeah, it happens. It still happens.
But we'll
I got a sensitive tummy, so you get things together.
So we will drink in your stead because we have some beers we're going to drink on the show. So
good.
Don't be jealous.
What are you guys starting with?
We got a little Stockyards Trotter.
Okay.
And then we got a Crane. What is that?
Thunder Gong.
And then we've got a few mystery beers that Nick doesn't know what I brought. So that'll be fun. I'll bring them out of the bag.
That's our shtick.
So you ready to roll?
Should we do this?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Beers with Nigel is poured for you by Dire Oil Graphics, promotional products and design. They cover your brand bumper to bumper with graphic design, promo products, and print. See what Dire Oil Graphics can build for you at direoil.com. That's DYEROIL.com.
Welcome to Beers with Nigel. I'm Nigel.
I'm that other guy.
It's a show about beer
and other things,
and
sometimes
other stuff.
Things, whatever.
We're back at it after we had to take a week off, didn't we?
We took a week off to recover from the Barrel and Flow
Fest in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But let's welcome to the show Damon Arredondo. What's up, brother?
Oh, just living the dream, surviving the pandemic.
Well, we're glad to have you on. I'm a fan of yours. We've talked a couple of times. I think we're on the same wavelength when it comes to certain things, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But first things first, let's talk about who you are. Who are you? If somebody said, "Who is that guy?"
I always started as a dad. I'm a dad first, a brewer, consultant, community builder, so I've been in the beer industry about 10 years. Been in Bend, Oregon, brewed there for about 3 years, was a head brewer. Colorado, tried to pursue my own thing, kind of fell through, and then moved back to Kansas City where I was a head brewer at Strange Days Brewing for about 2.5 years, and then jumped into consulting and got a few projects, side projects that I'm working on, starting my own LatinX beer brand. It's going to be a contract brand. I can't give the name yet. Still working on it, finalizing some agreements. I'm working on a book.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, working on a book, and then doing ultimately my dream of having an urban farm brewery. So kind of working towards that project as well. That's kind of on the back burner. Can't do too many things at once.
I want to hear more about that dream later, though.
Yeah,
we're gonna circle back around to that one.
Yeah. So, are you a native Kansas Cityan?
I am born and raised, actually in Parkville, so just north. It was its own unique community there, for sure.
Well, let's start with this, as we always do. Obviously, you've extensive background in beer. Everybody has a good story as to what got you into craft. But before that, do you remember the first thing that you drank that was craft that you were like, oh, wow, this is different than what I've been drinking?
Shoot. Yeah, I mean, I would say probably Sierra Nevada. It was their, let's see, what was it? Just standard IPA. This was a long time ago. I can't even remember. Actually, no, it was Stone. It was Stone and Joy Bite. And
oh, yeah.
It was early on, and it was just one of those ones that I didn't like it, but I was like, okay, this is unique. It was different. And I don't know, it just kind of got me into more. And now I'm not even a huge West Coast IPA fan, but I appreciate Stone for definitely getting me more into it and stuff.
What were you drinking before that?
Bush. Bush got me through high school and college.
That's all you can afford.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whoever's brother could buy it for us.
Nice. So,
But yeah, go ahead.
where'd you go to high school at? In Parkville?
I went to St. Pius High School,
Oh,
just
okay.
north of the river, a little Catholic school. So I mentioned the guilt earlier. There's plenty of it there. Yeah, it was one of those places where it was the sooner I could get out, the better.
So,
I was a traveler. I needed to go out and see places and explore.
so what got you into craft beer? You had that stone, and then obviously you've done a bunch of things. Tell us about that journey.
Well, I actually got into beer before that. I had a neighbor across the street who he had the turkey fryer and stuff. I was like, what the hell is he doing? So I was 18, walked across the street, and I was like, hey, what's going on here? I'm curious. I always cooked at home and was more into, food and stuff. And I had 3 other siblings. And so a family of 4 kids is like, you eat what you can take, and so quality was never necessary at my house, and I always wanted more. And so I saw this guy, and I was like, what are you doing? He taught me, oh, I'm making beer, I'm doing all this. And so I did a couple batches with him, and so I was homebrewing since I was 18, and it was terrible. The first batch was terrible. It was like a winter porter. I don't know, because why not? But I put it in my parents' basement to let it sit, and we had bottled it and conditioned. And about 6 months later, I totally forgot about it. Came back to it, and it was a whole different beer.
Yeah.
And it was much more balanced, a little bitter from all the spices in it over time. But I was like, oh my God, this is something I could get into. I appreciate that creative side of it. And I totally nerded out with the science a bit too. So for somebody who hated science in high school, getting into it through, I was like, finally, I could see why we're learning.
Apply it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I was pretty grateful for that experience. And then I was home brewing in my dorm room, and illegally in 2 different colleges. And it was just kind of experimenting.
I had friends in college who brewed or attempted to brew.
It's not
never anybody in the dorm room though.
Yeah, I mean it was trash. I had like the stovetop, the electric stovetop and stuff, and it was terrible. But I just got to say I made it, and
people probably still drank it, didn't they?
Yeah, in college you don't care.
Yeah, there was alcohol, so whatever.
So you did the home brewing thing, and then you're in college brewing. What was next in your history of beer?
Oh man, so it was the Enjoy By. I believe it was Enjoy By. It was one of the Stone beers, and that's one that kind of stands out. But I had that, and then I moved to a college in Western Colorado. It was called Mesa State, and right across the street from my dorm was a brewery called Canna Creek Brewing Company, and any money I made that didn't go to necessary expenses went to beer. And so I started playing rugby, and one of the owners played rugby and supported the club. And so I would go over there. They let me kind of shadow a little bit. And then after I graduated, went down to Costa Rica with my ex for about 8 months. She was in a graduate program, and I had called the only craft beer shop in the country, who was, I don't know, 150 miles away. But the guy was like, oh, I'm driving by, I could drop stuff off for you. So he left it under a tree, called me. It was like, hey, I left it here. You could go pick it. It was totally came off like a drug deal. But and went and got the stuff, and I was home brewing in Costa Rica. Did about 3-4 batches, and 2 of them blew up in the washroom. Luckily, everything was tile, but it's hard to have any temperature control in a 95-degree humid climate all the time. So we had a sink. So I just did water and was hoping that water would help. I did a couple saisons, and English beer I was like, okay, I think this yeast will take off. And before I knew it, the whole room was horrible. It was brown. And my ex was not happy with that.
So while you were doing this, were you obviously you're brewing on the brain? Were you thinking about I want to do something in the industry at that point?
Not really. It was something to do because since we were there for her graduate program, she was busy doing all that stuff. I was like, and I was playing technically semi-pro basketball down there. I played a couple of years of college ball, but I played with the local city team, and they paid me in Taco Bell. They're like, we have to. It was fun. They were like, we have to pay you something technically. I was like, okay, just how about buy me food whenever we drive through San Jose. And Taco Bell was the thing. I was like, that's my link to the United States. Is like, I need my gut bombs. But but when I was there, as I started doing more home brewing, I just got into it more, and I knew I wanted to avoid the real world. And so that was partly why I was in Costa Rica, but I was like, I can't have an office job. I graduated with way too many credits in a short amount of time, couple double majored, and I was just like, I can't be an office person like that. I would just be the crazy person that would throw the computer out the window and maybe jump with it. So
it sounds like you figured that out early. I mean, you said even in high school, you knew like I just had to get out.
I'm kind of fidgety, and so it didn't take long for me to figure out that like sitting still is about the last thing I should be doing.
What were your majors?
Entrepreneurship and marketing, and then
no, that fits.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and then I had technically a minor. I say technically in that I had more credits than I needed for a minor in history, but I transferred a few schools and then lost credits along the way. So I still credit myself in having a minor in history too.
So you're an adventurous soul, man. It sounds like you're just you've moved around the country. So at what point did you've been brewing, you've been home brewing, you've been blowing up shit, and then you're like, you know what, I'm going to go work for a brewery. When did that start entering into your mind?
Oh man. Actually, when I was in Costa Rica, one thing I did was I was like, okay, I don't know anything about the craft beer industry, but what I know is I like making it. So I ended up just like cold calling breweries all over. And I remember one of the biggest breweries at the time west of the Mississippi was Bear Republic.
Yeah.
That Racer 5 was one of their main beers, and they were getting really big, and they were one that were like, probably early 90s is when they first started, but they were getting pretty big. And so anyways, I called them, and these places, there were probably under 2,000 breweries at the time. And I was able to call and talk to their owner like right away. And then, who was like the head brewer. And I was calling all these breweries who are big now, but back then I was like calling and talking to big names. I didn't even know it then, how like significant these people were. And I was just like, hey, I graduated these degrees. That gets me nothing. But how do I get into the beer industry? And, most people are just like, find any way you can, is like volunteer, do whatever. Which what I now realize is totally comes from a place of privilege to be able to volunteer a lot of time. And, like how many people can actually give 20 hours a week volunteering?
Right.
And so I was fortunate enough. I moved back a little early from Costa Rica and got my first job volunteering at Weston Brewing in Weston, Missouri. And so I was just helping on the bottling line. And after a few months, they offered pay, which was minimum wage, probably.
Right,
I can't.
right.
It was low. And then just kept asking, how can I learn? How could I, whatever. And they just let me shadow on everything. And then after that, it was, as I moved to Colorado, in between had lived in Canada for about 3 months, but volunteered at a couple breweries on the travel up. When I was there, every other day I was volunteering at a brewery. And yeah, it was just crazy stuff. Just found any way to get into a brewery that I could. And then moved to Oregon and volunteered first. And then it didn't take long. Like my work ethic was apparent, and that it got me paid pretty well early.
Where were you? Where were you at in Oregon?
I was in Bend, Oregon.
Okay.
There for about 3.5 years.
So you're in you. I mean, that's after all these volunteering places, and you go to like the mecca of Oregon, of beers everywhere.
Yeah.
How did it? What was it like volunteering and then actually jumping up, and obviously you moved into the head brewer situation at some point.
Yeah. So that was my first job. Initially volunteering was at Boneyard Brewing. They have RPM, which was one of the first Citra heavy IPAs in the Northwest, and for a while they're one of the fastest growing breweries, and just got bought recently or part of them got bought recently by Deschutes. But yeah, I was just washing kegs, and I went in like every day, 3-4 days in a row, and gave it to one person. And then I went in, I was like, is the owner here? And they're like, yeah, he is, but he's not seeing anyone. I was like, okay, can you give him my resume? Like, go in there and give him my resume. And then the next day I came back and I was like, hey, did you get my resume? And he's like, yeah, I got both of them here. I was like, okay, just making sure I'm ready. Like, if there's anything you need done, holler. And I also said, I have a marketing background. I'd be happy to, cut my teeth a little bit on that. He's like, we don't do marketing. We're too punk rock for that. And I was like, okay. And if anybody knows Boneyard, they're like a skull and two wrenches. Uh-huh. And the owner's like all tatted up, and he was like a surfer bro, like, and just built everything by hand and welded all the tanks together and stuff. And he's like rough around the edges. And he's like, yeah, we're too punk rock. I was like, okay, fair enough. But yeah, so after working, he finally was like, you know what, I like you. I'm a little annoyed by you, but I appreciate it. He's like, we've got a stack of about 300 kegs we need cleaned. Can you do it? I was like, okay. And I knocked it out, and he was like, holy shit. Yeah, I'll pay you. Like, I've got more things that need cleaned. I was like, great.
Pay is good.
Yeah. And so I was like, I'm going to work here until I find another opportunity. Kept looking, got into another brewery. That was a little hairy. The owner was stealing money, and there were some sketchy situations there where a keg nearly blew up when I was washing kegs, and because there was no regulator on it, and I didn't know it. I was just cleaning kegs, and
right.
Before I knew it, the plastic part, it was plastic 6 barrels, and one of the bottom shot all the way to the ceiling about 20 feet up and cut a hole through it. And I was like, and then next day came back, he was fermenting a Saison and took the PRV off. And so he had capped it for whatever reason, no PRV. And I came in and the manway was bubbled out. And I was like, I quit. Like, my life is in danger. This dude's stealing money. I don't know how to handle this. I'm too young to die.
Or to be maimed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so I quit, but luckily got into Good Life Brewing. After that, Good Life's pretty big in the Northwest. Have won a handful of GABF medals and stuff, but they were a 30-barrel brew system. And so really cut my teeth on brewing professionally there. And then if anybody is familiar with the beer industry in terms of late work, it's sometimes there's a lot of leaving to move up the ladder.
Right.
And so I had short stints at a few places in order to keep moving up and get opportunities. And I left Good Life, went to Siebel Brew School in Chicago and Germany. Came back and became the lead brewer at a 10-barrel brew pub and helped lead their 30-barrel expansion in a 14,000 square foot facility. It was called Silver Moon. And when I was there, became head brewer of a contract brand brewed at Silver Moon. I was the head brewer for the contract brand called Tranquilo Especial. And so won an award with that recipe in the North American Brewers Association, NABA awards in the Latin American, whatever category. That's not even a real category. They threw a bunch of words in there. But just won silver in that category, and took final round in the amber version of that beer, and just really validate a lot of the work and my belief system.
Gotcha.
Kind of how beer goes. Yeah.
It's time for a mystery beer.
Is it mystery beer time?
So Damon, this is the mystery beer bag. We got it from a golf course. Well, we didn't get it, and I don't think it was bought either.
An unnamed friend.
Yeah, and he's been named, but he won't come on the show, fucker.
Rat bastard.
But here's the first mystery bag. So I'm running out of
fancy paper bag.
Well, it's the shipping envelope. I'm out of bags, out of brown paper bags. So so we're gonna go with that. Let's see what's in there.
Delivered by Amazon, apparently.
Yeah, it's straight from Amazon Brewery. They'll probably get into that next. That's a fancy beer.
That is a fancy beer.
Yes.
The calm before the storm. Sour ale with vanilla, peaches, and coconut.
Yeah.
Dang.
You know where that's from, right?
I don't. Oh, that's Warcloud, baby.
That's Warcloud.
That's Warcloud Brewing out of California.
Warcloud and Jay Wakefield.
That was their collab for.
Yeah. So we went to a beer fest last weekend and 2 weekends ago in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Barrel and Flow Fest. And they do all these collabs with all sorts of different people. It's really technically a black beer festival, but it's not a black beer festival because it's not all black people. But they do all these collabs, and so the funny thing is Jay Wakefield's in Florida, Warcloud's in LA, and they flew. Well, we call them the Wu-Tang of breweries because there's like 9 dudes involved.
Yeah.
Or 90. We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't really know.
So we got to meet them.
Some of them are ninjas, so you don't really ever see them.
It's definitely a posse. Their brand to brewing is something different than.
Look, there ain't no party like a Warcloud party.
Yeah, shit.
Yeah,
So
I believe that.
So they flew 6, maybe 3 or 4 guys flew to Miami to do the beer with Jay Wakefield.
Jeez.
And at the festival, it was like 5 or 6 of them, and they poured 1 beer. But it was a hit, and that's the beer. So
they poured 1 beer, and they had a beer pong table.
They did. They sure did.
What else do you need?
So the one thing I like about them is that it's a spectrum of colors. They've got white, black, Asian, Latino, whatever. It's a little bit of everybody, which they're I'm sure that's probably the next question. You moving and around trying to make your way in the beer game. There's not too many people of color in it. What was that like?
No, so that was something I noticed really early on going to Craft Brewers Conference. I'd been going for years. And just from the get-go, I was like, okay, where are all the people of color at? I was like, I'm like, I grew up in Parkville, which is a very white community. I'm half German, but I stood out because I was big and dark. And so I didn't identify culturally, but like racially, there were still some things that were happening that I'm still figuring out today. Right. But it was like, I just realized that I started gravitating towards or started noticing these things, because I would gravitate towards the people of color because I'd be like, oh, hey, there's someone else that's like slightly darker like me that, gradually over the years it's growing. But like Bend, Oregon had like, no one in the beer industry. One of my best friends, he was Mexican from Mexico, he still is. He's alive.
That's good.
That's good information.
But he was like one of the only persons I knew, and the reason he became part of the beer industry. He just moved from the kitchen. They needed help on the canning line one day, and he just worked really freaking hard and found his way in. But it wasn't like a passion. He didn't even know craft beer really was a thing. So there wasn't access or entry for people of color around there. And so we kind of connected there. But from that point on, I had definitely sort of been vocal about it and had been calling some breweries out at the Craft Brewers Conference and stuff. One in particular, there was Ska Brewing. They have the Mexican lager, but it's Logger. And so they had this caricature of a Mexican under a tree with a chainsaw and a sombrero. And I was just like, who are you guys catering to? This is clearly not catered to the Mexican community.
Right.
And I was in this auditorium. There's, a few thousand. And I just remember like saying it. And a few people like turned because I guess the Scott guys were there. And I was like, sorry. They weren't too pleased about it. But and I would say stuff about like blonde ales and how come we're always got these like busty chicks. That's like low hanging fruit. I was like, okay, we're past that. So I don't know.
That's one of those sorry, not sorry moments, though, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, people love it, but it's like if we're as an industry trying to be better, we got to be better.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, for you weren't really that sorry for calling it out.
Oh no. Yeah, that it was easy, and so there had already been those discussions, and Dr. J, if you guys are familiar within the beer industry, some of the leaders, Dr. J came in early and really started shifting the conversation. And so I kind of followed her for years, as a puppy, like a puppy at the CDC. Like I went to all of her seminars. I followed her everywhere. And now I'm working with her on a lot of stuff. But
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jay Wakefield and Warcloud. This beer is fucking fabulous.
It's amazing.
That's I don't know how many beers we had at the festival, but out of the can, it's really nice. So what they did was at the festival, they did 15 collabs that you could actually get with Tavor. So that was pretty cool. So even if you didn't go to the festival, you could actually order the beers. So knowing what we do when we go to festivals, it's more talking than drinking. So, so I was like, I'm going to order those 15 collabs because I know I'm not going to have all the collabs at the festival. So it was, yeah. So
we made a valiant effort.
I mean, we did.
We made a good effort.
We did. It's so spread out. Half the breweries. So it's beer, but it's also music and it's arts and it's vendors and it's not all it might be vendor, beer, artist, vendor, beer. So they're not all. You have to go around and find the shit.
It's not all lumped by section.
No. So there were some breweries we never got to. We're like, we never went down that street because it was like on 5 streets. So it was pretty dope. It's one of my favorite festivals.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember when that brewery that beer fest was started. That it was all the articles were about a black renaissance in the beer industry and stuff. And but definitely they focused on the culture side and the entertainment side, which was a big that's kind of where my focus is too. So I definitely paid attention to it and resonated with it. Just hope one day we get out of this so I can go next year or
Yeah, it was incredible. It's the only time I've been to a beer centered event where I was the minority. But it was really cool. And I think I told you
about time.
Yeah. I told you it was really interesting to see, just even sometimes just hanging out like after parties or different things. It was really interesting to me as the liberal white guilt guy. All those things we kind of only, me and my friends only talk about in hypotheticals, but to actually see some of those conversations and things happen from reality. Yeah, it was pretty awesome to watch.
I mean, that's the second year I've been to that festival and it still gives me goosebumps. It's just, it's just one of those festivals.
And honestly, just the coolest festival. Yeah. I mean, it was just, there wasn't not a single douche at a beer festival, which was like, I've never seen that before. Like nobody in a too tight polo shirt with the collar popped.
It's good to know that it can happen. There can be a beer event without the douchebags.
Yeah, just a really, really cool, well-run festival.
So one of the things I got to shout out those guys who put the fest together because all the artwork on the can. So check it out. Where we at?
Oh, sick.
So each can has its own unique artwork, and every collab can is from a different artist, and they all got paid to do it, which was, it's probably not the norm in the beer world. It's like you get some love
on every vendor.
Yeah, every musician got paid. So it's more than the beer fest. That's what I love about it, and the guys who put it on, shout out to Day and Ed. That's fucking dope. So at what point did you matriculate to Kansas City? Was that? Where were you before, and how did you end up here, back in KC? And was that a goal? Was that a goal of yours to come back?
No, I vowed I'd never come back.
No shit.
Yeah, I'm kind I'm kind of a mountain guy, adventure guy, and so I just want to be in a place where I could go, go rip it down a mountain or ride bikes, whatever it is. But, coming back here, it was ultimately for divorce.
Gotcha.
I was a little blindsided by it. But, we moved back to be closer to family and stuff. And so through the divorce, since my daughter's here, I'm going to be here.
Right.
But, it was one of the exciting parts about coming back was that the beer industry is so young here still.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity for me, like somebody with experience to come in and like support the community in some ways. And it's fun to be a part of it, because I had been in the most breweries per capita in the world in Bend, and Colorado, where, it's everybody and their cousin wants to start a brewery or has. And then, here in Kansas City, it's definitely a lot of really small breweries. It's almost, I kind of say like extensions of the garage, where it's like the scale up 1 barrel, 3 barrel, where it's really about creating these cool little communities in each tap room. And it's just fun to be a part of it. So now I'm definitely pursuing my own stuff and hope to join in more.
What do you see as like, as kind of the experienced guy who's done some traveling, been at some of those breweries, what are you seeing in a place like Kansas City as the opportunity to really, for them to kind of boom and grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of the Wild West where, everybody's trying to do everything. And you kind of see a little bit of like, okay, you'll see some experience and some non-experience, but it's cool, like seeing how tight knit a lot of these smaller breweries are, because they were home brewers and part of the same clubs and stuff like that. So they're really supporting each other. But I definitely can see the value of some of this experience coming in and supporting these breweries and them being like, oh, okay, we need to get to this place. And that's where hopefully, someone like me or some of these other really experienced brewers can give that, whether it's feedback, whether it's pointers, how to expand or how to do things in a way where it's sustainable and allows you to grow and have functionality as you grow. And so there's definitely experience there. But it's just exciting to be a part of it. When I was at Strange Days, I was on a 3.5 barrel system, and I came from production. So I came from 30 barrel batches. Yeah. You eliminate all the variables you have every variable you're dealing with at Strange Days. And, it was fun. It definitely took me out of my element initially, but the experience definitely taught me how to start eliminating some of these variables and create more consistency early and stuff. So, it's just fun. And I like some of my best friends, are brewers here in the city. Yeah.
So now that you're back and, like you said, the beer scene here is pretty young. When you left and now you came back, what's your thoughts on how it's grown? It's pretty crazy.
Well, when I left, I was, let's see, that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was nothing.
Well, there was Weston and Boulevard and maybe two others. I can't. Yeah, there were some of the old like City Market. I think was still there.
75th Street, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But that was it. And so I actually didn't really know anything about the local market. But as things started to develop, my family would send articles and everything about stuff that was happening. And so I always checked in and stuff, but never had connections until I moved back.
Yeah.
But pretty quickly just started reaching out and seeing who I could connect with and started attending events and stuff. And it was fun.
That's the nice thing about the city. Everybody's, in the beer community, they're very cool. Nobody, you can't, to your point, you went to go talk to the owner of that brewery. He's like, he's not talking to anybody. That doesn't happen here. You call up the owner, they're going to be like, well, what can I do for you? You know what I'm saying? Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I feel like here you can call anybody.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
And that builds loyalty to some of these breweries and stuff too. You know, it's accessibility to the owners and the decision makers, and for customers to come in and be like, oh, you know, hey, I'm just learning about this place and the owner's bartending or something. It's like,
yeah,
you know, it's pretty cool. That was one of my favorite parts of being at Strange Days is I would sit at the bar and just overhearing conversations and people, and I would get the honest feedback that way when people didn't know I was the brewer.
right.
That was when I was getting real feedback, was just like just listening to people's conversations mostly, you know, nothing too crazy, but
nothing too creepy.
Yeah, just being a little fly on the wall, but getting honest feedback. But then also, you know, people would start talking and be like, oh, hey, I'm Damon. Would you like to take a tour? You know,
right.
and of course it took like 2 minutes to walk through it, but it was, it just, you know, is a cool way to get people to like buy in and really find loyalty and appreciate it. And, you know, tell the story of beer, you know, and I loved it.
Yeah. I think that's the cool thing is like how many around here, all those small brewers, like think of the regulars, they all feel kind of a sense of ownership in those little breweries, right? They feel like, well, this is my place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the breweries I work at, there's particular people who come to that. They may visit other breweries, but they're always at.
But that's their place.
Their brewery. You know, you know, I got a buddy of mine on Fridays at noon. He's at Transparent. Sundays at noon. He's at Windshift every week. That's his thing. You know, he's there when the doors open. Yeah, damn near.
Yeah, you know, everybody wants to be Norm, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Everybody wants to be Norm.
One of my favorite, still one of my ideas. I'll put it out there. If somebody steals it, that's okay. What I wanted to do is like a founders club for the brewery I start up, and I want to get, I want to like fit seats to people's butts. And then have like a little plaque on it, and so it'll be like, "Come here." I would have a seat that fits your butt perfectly. It'll mold to your butt,
That's
and then I'll put a
awesome.
little plaque as like a founder's seat, you know, and so you know it's yours and it fits you perfectly.
That's pretty awesome.
That is a great
that's probably the most unique founders thing I've come across.
We've talked a lot about beer names and Founders Club walls, but that.
Yeah, we got the shape of my butt is on a seat.
Exactly. It's like, yeah,
that's forever.
Saran wrap on it, sit on it, exactly, and then put like a little gold plate on the side or something that says, you know, whose name it is, whose butt it is.
Nigel's ass.
Yeah, guess whose butt?
Yeah, exactly. The mystery butt seat.
Well, before we get in a little bit on your contract brewing thing that you're working on, tell us a little about what you're doing as a consultant and what you're working on there and how you're working with other breweries.
Yeah, so there was a brewery that just opened up in the Crossroads called Red Sash Brewing, and I had actually helped the gentleman who started that. His name's Pat. He's a veteran and taught a homebrew class at Strange Days with a nonprofit. After Action Network, and people would pay for a civilian would pay for the class, and part of the pay would pay for a veteran to join as well. And so I did this, and Pat was one of the vets, and he like fell in love with it right away. When he left, like kind of lost contact a little bit, and then a year and a half later, heard that he was going to open up a brewery or wanted to open up a brewery. So I reached out, was like, hey, timing's perfect, just about to leave Strange Days, and since you have no experience, it would behoove you to you know, have a consultant. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of expansions and growth and startups and stuff, and so anyways, got into that, and it was a full-time thing for a few months, and just left there about a month and a half ago. Their head brewer Mark is great, and they're doing some exciting stuff, but now I'm kind of reaching out. I had a 14 tap beer trailer I built when I lived in Colorado and sold that, and so I'm living a bit off of that money. It's crazy. Like as I start like telling my story, I'm like, oh man, I did a lot in a short amount of time. But sold that beer trailer, and you'll see it zipping around town with touring taps.
Nice.
And then, so just trying to find a few gigs now, but been putting a lot of time and energy into some of DEI committees that I'm on with the Brewers Association, with Master Brewers of America. I'm on the seminar subcommittee. I did a presentation at CBC this year. What else? Working on that book, and then trying to do this consulting as well. So it's definitely, I'm staying busy. It's just like, how do I make money now doing it?
So tell us about the book. I'm interested because I know you have opinions.
Oh yeah. And yeah, I tend to make people uncomfortable sometimes, but it's
that's a good thing.
Well, I'm just passionate, and I care about equality, and I care about creating opportunities, and I'm like, I just like jump into it. But this book was, so it was the Brewers Association publication wing. They reached out to me because I was on a couple of phone calls where I was asking questions and really probably getting too philosophical, but trying to like not do that. But they reached out to me and were like, "Oh, I really appreciated what you were saying. Have you ever thought of being an author?" I was like, "The fuck?" Like, I was just like, "Do you know me?"
Right there, right?
Yeah, I was like, "You don't even know me." I was like, "I'm no author." I totally got like imposter syndrome, and it was just like, I'm no expert. And like, I had a couple of days of just like freaking out because I was like, I think I've gone too far. I'm working on my own self-confidence, but as I started talking about it with my girlfriend and a few other people, they were just like, okay, so what's the problem? I was like, well, I'm no expert. Why should I be talking about culture and race and wellness and all this stuff? And they're like, well, just talk about your experience. I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'm an expert in my own experience.
Yes,
so,
you are.
First
and foremost.
So exactly. So I don't need to do anything on behalf or whatever. That's where people get in trouble. And so this book ultimately, it's going to be more creative. I think I'm going to title it "Leave Room or Make Room for Us: Stories of People Behind Craft Beer." And really, each chapter is going to be stresses or struggles that people go through. So really going to talk about the pandemic, parenting, just everyday things, anxiety, depression, ADHD, and just talk about it, how it applies to me, but then have a picture and a one-page story from people within the industry, just humanizing it and bringing it home. So it's like, oh, okay, like the beer is the exciting stuff. Everybody sees the labels and all this, and it's fun, but it's like everybody struggles. Everybody has their issues. Not issues, just has ours, things we got to work with, and calling it mental health problems and stuff. It's none of that. It's not a problem. It's just a thing. And so really just trying to normalize the conversation, and just everybody has stuff we're going through. And so having pictures and a face to some of these struggles and some of these things in the beer industry matters. And I really want this conversation to start around, I'll try not to go too deep into the weeds, but craft beer is notorious for exploiting its workforce and, free relying on volunteers, and all this stuff, and being like, oh, you get beer, but it's like, people are doing work, pay them a fair wage. Just because it's a cool industry doesn't mean that you should exploit them and pay. Yeah.
Give them a good wage and the beer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like, you're still a business.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it today, with all the jobs availability that's out there, and people not taking them because they're not willing to take the shitty jobs anymore.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a dignity thing, and it's our value is more. And so anyways, a lot of this is just, how do we really start creating a culture where, in order to make change, we need to start identifying these things in ourselves and start the conversation and have vocabulary, and have feelings, and that's okay. but that's how you hold place, and that's how you create change, is starting with yourself. And so that's kind of the crux of this book, I guess, is just let's look at it. We look like the people who are behind it, and now let's start with ourselves.
That's a lot to hit in one book, right? You're talking about classism and fair wages. You're talking about getting rid of destigmatizing mental health. I mean, that's a lot to put into one thing.
And the hard part is to not like go on rants and all this stuff about it, you know, but it's, you know, it's just really, you know, how do we have this conversation? How do we hold space, you know, and beer is a perfect vehicle to allow for that.
Well, and I think you said something good in the beginning of this kind of segment that we're in here, where you talked about, well, I'm the expert of my own story. And that's kind of the first step of wellness, right? Is owning your own story.
Yeah, one of the hardest
I think by putting it out there.
Yeah, one of the hardest things you could do is look at yourself objectively. You know, is like turn the mirror on yourself and be like, oh crap, I totally projected this thing because I'm actually scared. You know, and it's like, oh shit, yeah, that's the hardest thing. And then when people, you know, say, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel this way. It forces you to turn that mirror on yourself, and then it's like, uh-oh. How do you react? Defensive, or you're right, I did do that, I apologize.
Right. Right.
And that
thoughts and prayers do nothing. Actual change means something.
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah.
You know,
and that was one of the issues I had with the Black Lives Matter movement, is so many people, or not Black Lives Matter, but the Black is Beautiful, is like there are all these posts about these beers and stuff. Oh, us as a brewery, we are this. We are inclusive, and we all do all this. I'm like, yeah, but what are you doing? Do you have a workers handbook that actually suggests all these things that you say you're doing? Do you have you done these things? And it's like people are saying they're this, and then they're done, you know, and they don't do anything. And so that was the shit that shit pissed me off.
Yeah, and with that, you know, when Marcus did that, you know, he had good intentions, and some breweries did it for publicity. You know, and because there was the whole thing after it was all said and done. Well, where did that money go? Did you actually donate it to a cause for social justice?
Show the receipts.
And I think, you know, some breweries were forthcoming and said this money went here, but a lot of them, you know, it was radio silence. So you know that fucking sucks.
Well, and I think, you know, that's human nature is right. It's easy to jump on board. It's easy to post the platitudes on social media, right? Everybody loves to make a meme. But but I think, you know, it takes people like you, like our friend Shalonda in Chicago, you know, the action has to follow that platitude.
Yeah. And, you know, I have an opinion, of course, about like how donating 100% of the profit or of the money to nonprofits, like during a pandemic when it's a really expensive beer to make, I'm like, ugh, that's kind of hard to do for breweries. And so I didn't really love that there was the need to do 100%, but I wish it was like do what you can kind of thing, because, you know, we were all struggling and stuff at that time. But really getting the message out and really starting these conversations is what I appreciated. And it's forcing, even about the donation thing, it's forcing people to have to own up
conversation.
to own up to like, oh shit, yeah, maybe we should donate it because now we're being called out.
Well, and I think getting people to simply acknowledge and talk about Black brewers and Black breweries, that's an awesome first step.
Yeah.
But it's a first step.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's
like you want to put it in this. I'm an old sports writer, right? So let's put it in sports terms. It's about the follow through. Your pitch is no good if there's no follow through. You're a basketball player. Same thing from the free throw line, right?
Yep. You gotta hold it.
You know, that's the nice thing about Barrel and Flow, also formerly known as Fresh Fest, was, you know, I'm sure when you rolled up in there, because I've been talking about this festival for 2 years, you were probably blown away by the amount of Black breweries. You had to be.
I had no idea that there were that many.
In 2019, you know, I'd heard of them, this, that, and the other, but I go and to actually see that many people of color that are doing beer, you know, it's in this town, it's unheard of. I mean, it was you know, shout out to the guys from Vine Street, and, you know, love that they're getting the pub for it. But good Lord, I mean, we're just, the first Black brewery in
In
Missouri, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, and I know you, when we were both on that radio program, one of the things about craft beer in Kansas City, it's very white. I think there's a huge opportunity to get other people into it that historically not known what it is. Even the breweries that are in black and brown neighborhoods, or mostly brown neighborhoods, Boulevard, I'm looking at you. I mean, there's opportunity there, but we've talked about it on this podcast ad nauseum. It's about that action, boss. It's about that action. You got to go out and be intentional and say, okay, how are we going to reach out to these people? Because ultimately, it's twofold. If you don't do it, you can't rely on the white bearded guy to make all your money. You're missing a whole segment of the population where you could make more money. That's one side of it, but it's just good business to get the rest of the community involved. And hopefully, with Vine Street going in close to that area there, it's going to open the door to some other people saying, "Oh, look at these brothers making beer, and this isn't the beer we're used to." So, I know you've got opinions, because about what Kansas City is. Kansas City can be much better when it comes to, being more inclusive when it comes to beer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the United States, so there's a rich history of not being inclusive. But Kansas City in particular is, just with all the redlining, it still is one of the most segregated cities in the United States. All the way until mid 80s, when there were still covenants and stuff that had stuff. But I think that I mean, there's just opportunity, and shying. We shouldn't shy away from the fact that there is financial benefit from it.
Right.
Like in order to get more people to do it, you still have to have that conversation. But that's not the sole reason. And one thing I believe about breweries is, first of all, cities seek us out. Some of the most gentrified places start with a brewery and a coffee shop.
Right.
And so we need to curb that. But also, tasting rooms are community centers, and they're opportunities to bring people in and share stories and empower people, and people want to be here. So I feel a responsibility in any tap room place I work for, or when we do our own. It's like I for sure have a responsibility because I have a platform. Right. And if we're not trying to create opportunities for everyone and act in that way, then it's like, I don't know, that shit pisses me off. And so I won't frequent places that don't at least acknowledge the privilege or acknowledge certain things, or if there are issues, then I'm like, I could go somewhere else.
I like what you said about you've got to acknowledge the money part, that it is a money-making opportunity as well. And just to think about like our society as a whole, right? If you go back to during the recession, when did going green become a big deal? Well, when somebody figured out, hey, look, we can make money. You can cut 10% off your bill, right? Or whatever it was. Like there's actual ROI or the government put, here's some kickbacks, right? If you do these things. So it's fine to say, hey, to acknowledge that it's about money, but then also take that opportunity, use that platform to do real change.
Yeah, because if it's just about money and you get found out, it won't look good.
Well, but I mean, we have to invite other. I mean, part of making that change and part of having the conversations, we need to invite other people to come make money too.
Yeah, and that's it. And,
Nigel should have just as much opportunity to get rich as me, even though he's British. He doesn't really count.
But on the flip side of that, the three breweries I work at, if somebody of color comes in there, whatever color, I'm always going to make it a point to make them feel super welcome. The one thing Kansas City does.
That seems like a heavy responsibility.
I don't. You know what? I don't think it is. To me, it's not. To me, if Damon comes into my brew pub, I'm going to make sure he knows he's fucking welcome. You know what I'm saying? Kansas City does not have a problem with women. We got plenty of women in the brew in the tap room.
Well,
Well,
one thing I love too about women is women drink more. How do I say this correctly? Women drink more per capita, like in volume, than they represent of total beer drinkers. So women are like 40% of total beer drinkers or craft beer drinkers, but they'll drink like 45% of the volume. And so
that's an interesting stat.
Yeah, and so it was just really interesting, and I don't know if this is now, but it was for years before, a handful of years before, in that women were more loyal to craft beer,
right?
Ultimately, and I just thought that was really interesting. I was like, why are we not trying to get more women in here too, and they drink more?
And the interesting thing is, as many people as we've talked to around the country, we're pretty ahead of the curve when it comes to women drinkers, because a lot of the people we talk to, they're like, we're trying to get people of color and women in here because it's all white dudes with beards, right? But you can go to Boulevard Beer Hall anytime, and generally women outnumber men. Yeah. Every time I go in there. Now, granted, I'm generally the only brother up in there. Aside, there used to be a couple of brothers that I know that work there, but I'm like, and of course, I'm a person that doesn't have a problem going into that space, right? But another person might be intimidated by that, and I've talked to people who have those hang-ups, Yeah.
Well, I was told by somebody is like, think about walking into what would be a traditional like black church, and like as a white person,
right?
And like you would notice right away, and like you would walk in and like you would feel out of your element. It's like, imagine, and this was a black person that was talking, and they were like, imagine that every day, right. In a lot of these communities, and so I was like, oh shit, okay, I need to just listen. Because really, like how I grew up and raised, I was like like I said, I'm half German and grew up in a community where culturally I didn't identify as Latinx. Racially, I did. And I was big. I was like a foot taller than kids in baseball, and so my mom had to carry my birth certificate around because people would try to stop the game thinking I was like some Cuban kid, because it was like,
no, he's not Albert Pujols.
Yeah, and I was hitting home runs, and then everybody grew up, and then I was below average. But it's just one of those things where, like, if I was a big white kid, that never would have been a thing, there were just things that always happened where I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I was the Mexican in school, I was called the Mexican, and I laughed it off because it didn't really connect, but it still was, I still felt it. And when I was at basketball camps or whatever camp, I always gravitated towards the kids of color, and always hung out with them. And I couldn't explain why either at the time.
Yeah.
But,
I had the benefit of growing up in two different worlds, so I can straddle the line, because early growing up, I grew up in a black neighborhood in London. It was all black, still is. Not as much now, but then when we moved to Ipswich, which is 90 miles from London before we came to the States, it was all white. And so when I came to the States, I could straddle either side, but as I've told Nick before, I didn't see the whole black and white thing till I got to the United States. Yeah. When I came as a 12-year-old, I was like, holy shit, this is a thing here.
Till he took a bus to the South.
Well, there was that. I did go to Arkansas when we first got here, so there's that. So Southern Arkansas.
Well, I'm glad you survived.
I did.
Yeah. There's a book. It's called Caste, and it talks about the caste system here in the United States, and it's heavy. It is like I had to read it pieces at a time, because it was like, oh, like it is graphic in terms of verbiage and stuff, but it was like, it's something that gives a real, honest, upfront, in your face, unapologetic, this is what happened, no whitewashing anything.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, I just had to take a break and just go on walks, and I would just cry. And it's like, I don't even all I can do is feel it, and that's
Yeah.
it, and listen. And
Yeah.
it's heavy stuff, and it's real, and it still is. And so that's the kind of thing. It's just, how do we break these systems? And hopefully
Yeah.
it starts with talking about our feelings and emotions, identifying it, and then being able to hold space, because it's like, oh yeah, I feel feelings. Here's what I'm feeling. I could tell you how I'm. Just being able to have the language and vocabulary to say your emotions makes connections in your brain and allows you to be more empathetic and, and courageous in those ways, and vulnerable.
And I think, and to go back to one of your earlier points too, I think, and to be able to say, I have value for the work, right? I mean, you said at the very beginning, it's a very privileged thing to say. You should just volunteer and work your way up from there, right? I mean, the fun narrative now is nobody wants to work. Well, no, it's nobody wants to work for money that doesn't let them live.
Right.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Well, it was like Missouri.
Or that I can't live in your community.
Yeah. When Missouri cut the stipend, and they were like, oh, it's because everybody's being lazy and sucking off the teat of the whatever. But like, most people haven't taken those jobs back because they don't want to go back to those shitty jobs. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the money. Yeah.
Or, in our community here, where it's, are you paying them enough to actually live in this community?
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not, then they have to, it's got to be enough for them to pay for their car.
Kansas City's not as inexpensive. Yeah. Kansas City's not as inexpensive as they make it out to be.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially the suburbs.
Yeah. Considering the driving and stuff, it is actually almost equal to living in Chicago. Yeah. With cost of living and driving expenses and stuff like that, and not great public transportation.
No, terrible public transportation.
Yeah.
So what? I know you kind of said you couldn't give up information about what you're going to do next, but can you tell us anything that you some breaking news of something? I mean, are you going to open? I mean, is there a brewery in the works? What the hell?
Yes. So just starting with the brand, a LatinX brand, really trying to create this thing that empowers and elevates people in the Latinx community's voice. And I challenge people. I'm like, think of one Latina, Latinx person in Kansas City that's like a prominent beer industry, or there's very few, if any, or just in the beer industry. And
I can think of two.
Yeah.
Two.
Yeah, it's same thing, and it's people have just assumed Corona Modelo, that's their thing. We're only going to make light beers like them, whatever. But it's really about sharing people's stories, and where are you on the spectrum? Like for me, is where am I on the spectrum of the Latinx community? I didn't grow up with it racially or culturally. I did barely racially. I tanned well and have a Mexican last name, but I still identify as that because it's part of my story. And so how do we share those stories? What does it mean to be Panamanian American, Mexican American, Colombian American, Latina, Chicano, whatever. But it's really about just empowering people. And so this project, I'm partnering with a local band that has some. They've done well for themselves. They are Latinx, and just finalizing some agreements with them and going to. I can't give the name because there's some licensing stuff.
That's cool. That's cool.
hoping in the next few months we'll have something. Starting with a couple of probably two brands or two styles, and really just want to support. And we'll probably do a couple grocery store chains, liquor store chains if we can, kind of get into those, and then try to hit some of these local mom and pop Latinx stores, taquerias and stuff, and really just try to, hey, if you share those people's stories as part of it too.
Nice. Yeah. Nick, you got a beer over there, buddy?
We do. We have our next mystery beer from Thin Man Brewery, Buffalo.
Shout out to Thin Man.
Minkey Boodle. It's a raspberry sour ale. We didn't play our game the last time, so we're going to play it this one. You got to guess the ABV.
I do not know. It's sour. It's probably 5.6. hey,
you never know these days. I mean, I've seen some down at 3, and I've seen some sours at like 12%. I'm like, no, thank you.
It's pretty. You know,
I like it.
I will tell you this, Damon. I had your beer that you did at Crane. Good shit.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good shit. Because I went the 4th brewery I work at. I do some production over there for them every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Chris is like, "You want some beer to go?" I'm like, "Sure." You know, he gives me like a case and a half. Like,
good. No,
here, take some of Damon's beer.
Yeah. I still got like 40 cases of that, so technically I can't sell it. I just have to. You got to
give it away, yeah.
Yep.
And I did. I shared it at the breweries I work at, and people.
I appreciate it.
They loved the scan thing, the QR code.
Yeah.
So you, depending on if you want English or Spanish, you QR code one or the other.
Nice.
People just loved that. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, we're trying to get feedback, and that's one of the things. That's the intentionality that I always talk about when diving into DEI. Is you got to be intentional. And for us, is we're intentionally trying to get feedback from the Latinx community, also the beer community, but by splitting it Spanish, English, and then depending on how you identify, if you identify as Latinx or Hispanic or Latino, then you have additional questions that no one else would. And that gives me information to be able to not sell to them, but to be able to help empower and connect with the community. And so that's part of the intentionality that we're trying to do.
Before I give my follow-up question, Nigel, you stick with that guess?
I'm gonna go 5.7.
The actual retail ABV, 7%.
Oh shit! Well, they've hitting it well.
I feel like it took the pandemic for people to finally accept QR codes. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, like they've been around for 10, 15 years or longer even, really. But finally, I think during the pandemic, when we, in the beginning, we stopped using menus, all these things, people are finally now using QR codes. And it's interesting. I like how you've done that.
Yeah, it's
to try not only you're just gathering feedback, but you put it into the label, made it part of the art.
Yeah, and one of the things with it too, with the QR codes, is like it helps that the phones, like the camera, like is smart, so that it automatically scans the QR code.
Yeah, like 10 years ago, I would have like 3 different apps depending on what the QR code was.
Exactly.
No, that's pretty cool. So he kind of gave us some breaking news about what he's doing. So
I'll allow it.
I know. I wish I could do more, but
no.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm off the record now.
Yeah, and I'm excited for it because we're getting connected with some really awesome people in the local Latinx community too, and for me it's just about sharing stories and language. We're asking the question, what is being like Latinx American mean to you?
Right.
And just really trying to answer that question.
And that's a good opportunity because beer is communal.
Yep.
So you can have those conversations and introduce people to a whole nother genre of beer. Now, let's keep it real. I love me some Modelo. I had me a Modelo last night.
Same here. Yeah. No, and the style I was kind of going for was like a hoppier Modelo. Essentially, it's like an ale version of a Pilsner.
Yeah.
A cream ale, I guess, if you want. I threw a little Mexican or a little flaked corn in it just to like give it that. But anymore, I'm just going to do an ale version of a Pilsner. And the reason why I do ales, since I'm contracting, is faster and cheaper.
Yeah.
And I actually, the award I won in that category in the Mexican and Latin American lager category was with the ale yeast. So I was like, okay, perfect.
Will there be sombreros in your label art?
Be what?
Will there be sombreros in your label art?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Whatever stereotype I'm doing.
Just put a white guy with a beard. That'll work.
Exactly. This isn't for you. It's like a white guy with a beard with a line through it.
So is there a style or style maybe you like to drink or brew that you're particular to?
One thing I really love, and I think I started to get the reputation of Strange Days, is lighter versions of some of these bigger beers. So, just with the hazies and the stouts and stuff, I still like doing drinkability as kind of my MO. And so I just go for like, I want all the flavor, but I don't want to feel full at the end of it. I want people to come and have lighter beers and have multiple beers and be safe. But I would say like just session styles, session IPA, session, just session lagers, session stouts, even things that they can also be gateway beers. People to get people into craft beer and approachable. I just really love those styles because I don't want to feel full. And like I said earlier, I have a sensitive tummy. So when I start getting some of these thick, juicy things and like thick stouts and high alcohol stuff, like my stomach hates it. And I'm kind of one and done on those. So the drinkability matters. And at Strange Days, I always looked at the average ABV of the lineup, and being around 6 was really important for me.
You know who he sounds like, right?
Well, we've had a few now that talk like that, but out of Pathlight.
But Nolan down at Transparent.
Right.
You ever been to Transparent in Grandview?
I haven't.
That's right. That's what he does.
Nice.
That's exactly what he does. And so does Tanner over at
what do you say? I like to drink, so I want to make lower ABV so I can drink a lot. It's I've won a few other like People's Choice at things when I was in Oregon, and it was the drinkability is kind of the factor that we went for, and that's what did well. And I was like, well, I might, I'm not aiming for the Untapped ratings or anything like that. I'm like, I want to sell beer. Like, it's still business. I still need to sell it. But there's somebody who I really appreciate the beers that they do is Alma Mater. And his experience and mine are, I'm not going to say we're similar, but we kind of followed the same trajectory. And doing lagers, and he kind of, I don't even know if they were aiming to do as many of the juicies and hazies as they do now initially, but they were doing really well, and so they started doing more of them. But doing the lagers, that once I have my own place, I'm definitely going to be doing handful of lagers and sessions. Like I want to do a session series of beers and bottle or can them and do that.
And I think like Nick Mater they're just consistent in everything. So why not? There's you can go, how it is. You can go to breweries. You can go down the menu, and there's 4 good ones, and there might be one dog in the bunch. That's one of those breweries where it's continuously just always consistent. And every time you drink one of the beers, you're like, well, fuck.
Exactly.
I mean, he's just that kind of brewer. I'm sure everybody in town, is aiming to be like that, or BKS, or or Windshift, or people who are really just dynamic and consistently consistent. I mean, there's something to be said for that. And you kind of talked about that earlier. It's about doing it and doing it well, and honing your craft and being good at you want to produce quality beer. You want to sell it, but you want this shit to be good.
And one of the hardest things is to take criticism and take feedback, and ask questions. And so that's one thing I always encourage is, whenever I was learning in the beer industry and stuff, I would go shadow. I go ask questions. Hey, try my beer. What do you think? And being able to take that, and not take it personal. I mean, it's, we're chefs, liquid chefs, and it's like people will send food
be vulnerable back. Again.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that a beer name somewhere? I'm vulnerable.
So I have a whole idea for a series of beers that I want to do that has to do with emotions and just defining it for people. And so each beer is named a different emotion.
I dig it.
And just start the conversation.
I fucking dig it.
I love it. That is awesome.
Dude, it's been honored to have you on, man. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while.
For sure. I appreciate
it. It was cool when we ended up on the radio together. That was super weird, but
it was kind of funny. They asked me, they were like, okay, on behalf of all Latinx community, what is it? I was like, I'm not going to fall into that.
Here's
trap.
one megaphone. You're going to talk for all of them.
Yeah.
No, because even when they reached out to me, I'm like, why do you motherfuckers want to talk to me? I think it was Pete. Pete put them on us. I think that's what they wanted a wide swap.
There's our beer name. Blame Pete Doolin.
We're gonna make that happen.
Pete, he's the man. Yeah, he's one of my really good friends. So
he's awesome. I love his blog that he's doing. The Casey Ale Trail. If nobody's done any, listen to it. Read it yet? You should, because he's doing some really cool.
He's got
some
some great
exposés.
Yeah, subscribe to it. Pay a little bit. Help him out.
$5. $5.
I already did that, and of course.
Yeah, of course. So, if people want to follow you on the social medias, where can they find you?
Well, it's just my name, Damon.Arredondo, on Instagram, and then Facebook. Same thing, I guess. I don't know how you search it on. Just type my name in there, and you'll find me. I'm one of the only Damon Arredondos you'll find.
I'm going to say you probably are.
Yeah. But yeah, and I'm working on a few things, like I said, with that book, and probably going to be coming out with some more content and stuff. So,
well,
I'm excited about that book.
Yeah, anything you need from us to promote or do some shit with, dude, we're here for you.
I appreciate it. That means a lot.
Definitely. Yeah. Nick, where can they find us?
You can find us Beers with Nigel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I think, is that true?
Yeah,
I heard a rumor.
Yeah, Instagram. Yeah.
And you can find the Beers with Nigel podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and even the old Amazon Alexa device. Alexa, play the Beers with Nigel podcast.
There you go.
You've been listening to Beers with Nigel, a show about beer and other stuff, hosted by Nigel Woodbury and that other guy, Nick Parker. Beers with Nigel is poured for you by Dire Oil Graphics, providing bumper-to-bumper graphic design, promo products, and print services. Find them at direoil.com. Beers with Nigel is a proud member of the Fredcast Network and is available on all of your favorite podcast flavors. Find Beers with Nigel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and ask Alexa to play the Beers with Nigel podcast.